Have you ever had a moment in life when it feels like nothing is happening? You pray, you wait, you hope something will change, but days pass, weeks pass, sometimes even years pass, and everything still feels the same. The doors you hoped would open remain closed. The answers you prayed for never seem to come. The silence from heaven feels heavy, and slowly, a quiet question begins to form inside your heart. God, are you even doing anything at all? Maybe you're watching this right now because life has been confusing lately. Things haven't gone the way you expected. Plans fell apart. People walked away. Dreams you held onto suddenly feel distant. And in moments like that, it's easy to believe something painful, that maybe God is distant, maybe God forgot, maybe heaven is quiet because nothing is happening. But what if the silence you feel doesn't mean God is absent? What if the silence means something else entirely? Because throughout the Bible, there were many moments when it seemed like God was doing nothing, but behind the scenes, He was preparing something far greater than anyone could see. Sometimes, God does His greatest work in places no human eye can witness. Not in the loud miracles, not in the sudden answers, but quietly, patiently, in the background of our lives. And the truth is, some of the most important moments in God's story began in silence. Moments when people thought heaven had stopped moving, when in reality, God had already begun working behind the scenes. If there is one story in the Bible that shows how God works behind the scenes, it is the story of Joseph. When Joseph was young, God gave him a dream. A dream that one day his life would have a purpose far greater than he could imagine. But almost immediately after that dream, everything in Joseph's life began to fall apart. His own brothers betrayed him. They sold him into slavery. He was taken far away from his home, far away from everything he knew. And if you had been watching Joseph's life in that moment, you might have asked the same question many of us ask today. Where is God in all of this? Joseph had done nothing wrong, yet everything seemed to go wrong. Years passed, not days, not weeks, but years. Joseph was falsely accused of a crime he never committed, and he was thrown into prison. Think about that for a moment. Joseph had a dream from God, but instead of rising into something great, his life only seemed to fall deeper into darkness. If anyone had reason to believe that God was silent, it was Joseph. But here's the part of the story that Joseph himself could not see at the time. While Joseph was waiting, God was working. Every moment in that prison, every delay, every hardship, was quietly positioning Joseph exactly where he needed to be. Not for punishment, but for purpose. Because years later, something incredible happened. The same Joseph who once sat forgotten in a prison cell would stand before Pharaoh himself. And in a single moment, the path that once looked like failure suddenly revealed something else entirely. God had been guiding every step, every delay, every hardship, every moment that felt like nothing was happening, was actually leading Joseph to the place where he would save an entire nation from famine. What looked like silence was preparation. What looked like delay was positioning. And what looked like God doing nothing was actually God working behind the scenes the entire time. And maybe the same thing is happening in your life right now. Maybe you're in a season where nothing seems to be changing. You pray, but the answer hasn't come. You hope, but the door hasn't opened. You try to move forward, but the path ahead still feels unclear. And in moments like that, it's easy to believe that nothing is happening, that God is silent, that heaven has stepped back from your story. But what if the silence doesn't mean God has stopped working? What if the silence means something else? Because the truth is, when we look at the greatest stories in the Bible, we often only see the ending. We see Joseph standing before Pharaoh. We see David becoming king. We see the miracle, the victory, the moment everything finally makes sense. But what we often forget are the long seasons before those moments. The quiet seasons, the confusing seasons, the seasons where nothing seemed to be happening at all. Yet those were the very moments when God was shaping the story behind the scenes, preparing people, moving circumstances, opening doors that no one else could see yet. And sometimes, the same thing is happening in your life, even if you can't see it, even if it feels like nothing is changing, even if the silence feels heavy, because God's work is not always loud. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it happens slowly. And sometimes, the most important parts of your story are being written in moments where it feels like nothing is happening at all. So if you're in a season like that right now, a season where life feels uncertain, where prayers feel unanswered, where heaven feels quiet, don't be too quick to believe that God is absent, because just like in Joseph's story, God may already be working behind the scenes, preparing something you cannot see yet. And one day, the moment that once felt like silence may become the very moment that made everything in your story make sense.